Bror Saxberg is somebody who we at EdTech have been a huge fan of for a number of years. He, until recently, has been the Chief Learning Officer at Kaplan and was there for some 8 years, having huge influence over their organization. He has recently moved to become the Chief Scientific Advisor to the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, working with Jim Sheldon. So please welcome Bror Saxberg.
Hello, hello. So I have the pleasure of introducing the discussion about the Global Learning XPRIZE and the announcement of the semifinalists. Matt Keller, who is the Senior Director of this Global Learning XPRIZE, will come out shortly to share with you who has become semifinalists, but we'll begin with a short video. So thank you very much.
How do you guarantee the right of education to every single child on Earth? 260 million children go to school every year and leave without ever having learned to read or write a word. $15 million Global Learning XPRIZE, which is sponsored by Elon Musk, is designed to incentivize teams to create open source software and content that will bring children from low levels of literacy to much higher levels of literacy on their own and with each other in reading, writing, and math without the aid of a teacher or potentially even a literate adult in the community where they live. The dream is that someday that tablet will exist and I walk away and she's got a world-class education in the palm of her hand. A less impoverished world is a more just world, it's a more equitable world, and in the final analysis, it's a more peaceful world.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for coming. This is a pretty exciting day for us. We have been working on the Global Learning XPRIZE now for about 3.5 years, and I'll get a little bit into that story as the presentation goes on. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about XPRIZE, who we are. Many of you may not have heard of XPRIZE, what we do, and how we do it. So, we're an organization dedicated to structuring large-scale competitions to engage teams, to incentivize teams from around the world to think deeply and differently about how to solve some of the world's grand challenges. And the idea of this kind of incentivized competition is not a new one. Going back to the early 1700s, there was something called the Longitude Prize. At the time, ships were crashing into shores and treasure was lost and people were killed because people couldn't figure out how to measure longitude. They could dead reckon latitude, but they couldn't measure longitude. So the Crown at the time put up a prize to the person that could develop something that could measure longitude. And for years, people had thought the great astronomers of the day would win, that there would be some, Sir Halley and others were in the competition. They looked to the stars, they tried all kinds of things. And what happened was that this kind of unknown clockmaker from Bristol, England, invented something called the chronometer, which actually was the thing that measured longitude. And so this unknown person won a prize purse of roughly $4 million in today's dollars, and lots of people spent lots of money trying to win it. And the point of that is that the winning solution often comes from the most unlikely source. Charles Lindbergh, for example, flew across the Atlantic Ocean in pursuit of a $25,000 prize. Somebody put up a prize that said the first person that can fly from New York to Paris or Paris to New York nonstop would win $25,000. And everybody thought the great aviators of the day returning back from World War I were going to win this thing. The great admirals of the day who put champagne in their planes thinking that they were going to make it and celebrate when they landed in Paris, eventually crashed. And Lindbergh was this 24-year-old young guy who was a mail clerk flying from Joplin, Missouri to Kansas City. And he just said, I'm going to use one engine, I'm going to cut the edges off my maps, I'm going to be as innovative and daring as humanly possible. And he wins the prize, and he flies across the Atlantic Ocean, and within 24 hours becomes one of the most famous people in the world. Again, the unlikeliest of persons wins this competition, kind of catapulting humanity into the air age. And again, the point of that is that great ideas don't necessarily have to come from the experts of the world. They can come from people situated anywhere on planet Earth. And so Lindbergh's pursuit is very telling. Again, in the second half of that is that teams spent roughly, $500,000 trying to win $25,000. So your return on investment in this kind of incentivized competition is 10x, or maybe even 20x. And so fast forward about 75 years later, the founder of XPRIZE, a guy named Peter Diamandis, who'd studied at MIT and had wanted to be an astronaut, realized that he was not going to make it as an astronaut, given the acceptance rate into the academy. And so around that time, somebody sent him a book called The Spirit of St. Louis about Charles Lindbergh's flight across the Atlantic Ocean. He said, aha, I've got a great idea. What if we could kind of incentivize civilians, not governments, but civilians to think deeply about how you get into space? And so the Ansari Space XPRIZE was launched, and the result was that a team of civilians built a rocket ship that could go safely into Earth's orbit 100 kilometers up and back twice in a week with a payload of 3 people, and it was a success. And it helped launch what is still a relatively nascent civilian space industry, but you see Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic and Elon Musk's SpaceX. These are all results of that domino that was set into effect because of that Ansari XPRIZE. And so that winning rocket ship now sits in the Smithsonian next to Charles Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis, which is a really nice symmetry. So right now we've got about $100 million worth of prizes out there. We've got everything from a Google Lunar XPRIZE, which I think is $30 or $40 million to the team that can put a lunar on the moon. And we've got artificial intelligence XPRIZes. We've got adult literacy XPRIZes. We've had ocean cleanups XPRIZes where we challenged teams from around the world during the BP oil spill to develop technology that was much better than what was being used in the current industry. So at that time, when BP happened, the industry was still using technology that was used during the 15 years earlier. And the teams came up with things that were 6 times better, 4 times better. And so that technology is now being used, and we helped kind of change the way the technology was used to clean up, to separate oil from water. So we've got a whole array of things. And the reason that it's so eclectic in nature is that we look at the world's grand challenges and say, what is it that we can frame? How is it that we can frame this question so that teams can think really specifically in a really focused way about how to solve some of these problems? And so a few years ago, one of the things that XPRIZE was looking at was the grand challenge of literacy. There are an enormous amount of kids in the world who are out of school. So we came up with the Global Learning XPRIZE. And very succinctly, the Global Learning XPRIZE is a $15 million incentivized competition sponsored, the prize purse is sponsored by Elon Musk. And it is an open source competition designed to bring children on their own and with each other from relative zero literacy to literacy or close to it in reading, writing, and math within 15 months on their own and with each other. So the thinking is, can you develop technology that's so inferential, so intuitive, so dynamic, that when you give a child that device, whatever that device is, today it's a tablet, in a few years it may be a teddy bear, or it may be something else. It's something we can't even fathom right now. Can we give you this and then walk away knowing that you've got a world-class education in the palm of your hand? Can you bring out the autodidact in every child in a way that doesn't obviate the need for teachers, but actually supplements it in a profound way, and in a sense can replace that in places where there are no schools. So the 5 finalists for this prize will receive $1 million each. At the end of the competition, they will be required to open source both their code and their content. They've developed in both English and Swahili. So at the end of the day, even if nobody wins this, which is possible, it may be true that kids can't do this on their own, particularly living in the ecosystems of poverty where these kids live. The worst case scenario is that we've got 1 million lines of code and 10,000 pages of content in both English and Swahili, open and available to the world for people to build on for generations to come. And so that idea that children can take learning kind of in their own hands is a really powerful one. And it's an idea that has its roots in constructivism and allowing children to kind of play and understand through that dynamism of collaboration that I think we'll see come out of this. So why this prize and why now? Somewhere, depending on how you count, between 60 and 100 million kids don't have access to school. You know, many governments will count school attendance as 1 day per week. A child lives 9 kilometers. She walks down the side of a mountain. She gets there on a Tuesday. She goes back that evening, and that's 1 day, and she's counted. So there are, you know, a lot of kids who just can't access school. School is too far. Girls can't go to school, whatever the case may be. And so that's an enormous number in and of itself, which is an enormous kind of, you know, lost opportunity for lots of kids. There's also the quality aspect of education in many parts of the world, whether it's, you know, Detroit or you know, Dar es Salaam, it doesn't matter. 250 million kids go to school and they leave without ever having learned to read or write a word. And those are UNESCO's numbers. And that represents a kind of a staggering market failure, in my opinion. 250 million kids go to school for a number of years and leave without ever having to read or write a word. So there's something fundamentally wrong with that. And you can't train enough teachers or build enough schools to fix that. And so technology can scale. The one thing that can scale is technology. So how do you get technology into the hands of kids in a way that makes a difference? So right now we're preparing to do a field trial in eastern Tanzania where we have 200 very small sub-villages, about 4,000 children between ages 7 or 8 to 10. We've got 140 treatment villages and 60 control groups. And we're going to give kids with tablets filled with those applications of the 5 finalists in the Global Learning XPRIZE. We're going to baseline the kids and then endline the kids. And for 15 months, these kids are going to have tablets with very little instruction, only with the software and the content developed by these teams. And our hope is that these teams are so creative and so out-of-the-box thinking and have developed AI and inferential and machine learning in such a way that when these kids get these tablets, they're going to learn. And we're going to test them against controls. We're going to test them in all kinds of ways. We're doing this with UNESCO, with the United Nations World Food Program, with the government of Tanzania. Google has donated 8,000 tablets. There are 4,000 kids. I'm assuming 100% of the tablets will break. This is not a sustainable project. You can't replicate this. We're building all the solar, everything out. But what it is a proof of concept that if you can develop this technology and kids can learn, can you create a market for people to say, let's make the hardware that is impervious to environmental degradation, that is self-healing, self-charging, self-connecting. Can you push the ball forward in such a way that, you know, the market opens and people begin to think, hey, there is a way to reach these kids, and governments look at this as a tool, and multilateral institutions look at this as a possibility of reaching the hardest to reach kids and the kids who have access to the worst performing schools. So, you know, it's a moonshot. I mean, it's a true moonshot. And I think, you know, the ethos at XPRIZE is it's got to be both achievable and audacious. And when you have somebody like an Elon Musk behind you, you're not looking for incremental gains, right? You're looking for exponential change. And we view this as the possibility of exponential change. And we think that because of the teams that are here, the 11 semifinalists that you'll meet, and then finally the 5 finalists, I think that brilliance of the crowd, that creativity that comes from all walks of life is going to be the thing that I think really makes a difference and is the thing that will be transformational. So I'd love to introduce the semifinalist teams. And I'll read it from a piece of paper just so I don't forget anybody. And they're from all over, and we want you to meet them afterwards and meet them tonight. We're having a reception at the Rotunda restaurant from 7 to 11. And we'd love for you to kind of interact with them, ask them how, ask them what is in their application that makes it so different? Why is it that they think that they can actually give kids these tablets and walk away? So we've got Auto Cognita from both Hong Kong and the United States, Team 1 Billion from the United Kingdom, Learn Leap Fly from Canada, School of Games from the United States, Team Kit Kit School from both the United States and Korea, Leap to Know from South, the teams are here, which is great. You surprised me. Leap to Know from South Africa, Chimple, which is my favorite name, from India, LiteracyApp.org from Norway and Switzerland and elsewhere, Education Apps for All from the United States, CCI from New York, New York, RoboTutor from Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania. So these are the 11 semifinalist teams. These are the ones that are taking making great strides toward innovation and thinking differently, not in the typical way that kind of the development community thinks about education, or governments, or others kind of heavily invested in the field for a long time. They're thinking, how do we develop this technology in such a way that when we hand this to a child living off the grid in eastern Tanzania, that she is going to take that tablet with that software and with that content, and she is going to have a world-class education in the palm of her hand. These are the people who are making it happen. I encourage you to come tonight at 7 to meet them, talk with them, ask them how they've done it, and encourage them on their journey forward. So thank you very much.